All right. Okay. We are hanging out today with an expert, and that is Sharon Zhen. She is a buyer, and she also has up and running an e-commerce site called Shopstoree. In her past life, she's worked with Disney and Apple and Anthropologie, so she has a wealth of knowledge in the buying realm. And we're so glad that you could join us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for
Um,
inviting me. I think the community is awesome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Can you go ahead and just tell me a little bit more about what the job of a buyer entails and sort of what it looks like when you were buying and your background and all of that?
Yeah, I think you gave a really good intro. Those are the past companies that I worked for, and I primarily worked in the accessories world, so the non-size products. But it's a really exciting industry. I think, like, just to be able to see what goes on 6 months in advance when buyers are planning for, their next season and kind of seeing products and all the cool and fresh designers that are coming out with new things. So that's always exciting. And the other part of it that is really crucial to the buying role is to be able to manage a business. And that's, at the end of the day, you also have a budget that you are focused on delivering a return for. I think my best mentors have told me, the financial piece is something that you can learn and anybody can pick up, but to be a buyer, there has to be a product gut, and the most successful ones, and I think the most I think the ones that I look up to always had that really strong product gut, and it's not tangible, and I think that that's something really interesting. Yeah, in terms of buying and the whole kind of world, I know kind of it's for wholesale reps and for sellers and individual independent designers. That seems like a really intimidating. Like, how do you meet them, and where do you come across this cold email? How far can cold emails get? And so I'm just here to answer those questions. Sharon, you were talking about process. Should we dive into kind of like the process of getting in touch with a buyer and how that kind
Yeah,
of works?
definitely. Like, what does it look like for someone who wants to approach a buyer or get their stuff in a store? Like, how do they even go about that and contact them, and what works and what doesn't?
I think for me, what I found, I mean, there's obviously many different ways to go about it, and I think a lot of the independent sellers and designers out there have tried them. Going straight up to the store owner or going sometimes just cold calling or emailing. I've gotten all of those kinds of inbounds from sellers and designers. And it's, to me, I think, really getting yourself out there, and I want to actually put a lot of emphasis on building your story early. So creating a presence around your product, because as much as sellers are putting their product out there and they're creating beautiful things, like as a buyer, I do a lot of research too on my end, like on the internet, and I think in the internet age, you just kind of like, the world is so much smaller that you're just kind of, frequenting like blogs and Pinterest and all these things. So the more I think you put a presence out there, I think there's a greater chance for that kind of serendipitous encounter. Other ways that, for example, are working with representatives. I know that tends to be something that if you're a bit more established, you kind of take on some of that. You're able to take on that kind of cost to your bottom line. But we do, for example, at Anthropologie, we did work with a lot of reps that continuously, if we had a really great relationship with them, I would always go back to them for, who's their newest client and what kind of products they have that they feel would fit our needs. I would also say, like, going to shows. Like, if you can't go to the major trade shows, like doing craft fairs and holiday fairs and flea markets, just when you're selling direct to your customers, is a great way to do it, because buyers love to buy outside of working hours. I think that that's just part of the passion and the work, and it's just like it's innate in that kind of role. So I always frequent any kind of like weekly, weekend, fair, craft market that goes on, that I just kind of go and check things out, and I end up picking up business cards along the way. So I would just say, like, if the investment to go to a trade show when it's so professional and expensive is out of, is not in the conversation, I would really try to put myself out there in, like, bigger things, like bigger flea markets. I think that in LA there's like the Unique Show. I found that particularly inspiring. Yeah, I think that those are great ways to do it too. And cold emails actually sometimes work. So if you can somehow, I would say my advice is to go on LinkedIn, create a LinkedIn account, and kind of, it's doing research. So figuring out who works where and what their role is, and kind of guessing what their email might be. It's, I know that it sounds like, oh, kind of silly to do that, but it works sometimes. And I've worked with designers where I'm like, how did you get in touch with us? I just kind of found you on LinkedIn, and I just kind of guessed what your email was going to be. And so those are kind of unique stories, but there's really no kind of formula. There's no form to fill out, submit your product, even though there is sometimes on these websites. But I think for bigger retailers, it's just a matter of getting your story set and putting yourself out there.
If you mentioned people at craft fairs and flea markets, does that mean that they should be prepared with certain items then to give to a buyer? So if a buyer happens to be shopping one of those markets, what should they have ready? Oh,
actually, I would be really impressed. Oh.
There you go.
Okay. I was saying, I'd be really impressed if that happened, because that has not happened yet with me. But I think that you want to be able to give them everything at the get-go, because I think that the chances of them going back and remembering and filtering through those things might fall amongst the list of things they do throughout the week. But if you make a contact, I mean, if you're prepared, I mean, it's a great way to kind of have that conversation then and there. And that way, when they start the new week, the work week, it's fresh in their mind, and they have the collateral to kind of look through and reference. And I think that that's a really great idea, to have some line sheets available. But, just really have really wonderful product. And I know you guys all have your unique niches, and I'm sure you're killing that. So.
No, that's really important to remember, though, that, like, every situation you're in is kind of a potential selling situation for not just the people there. Like, even if you're like, oh, this is a dumb show or whatever, I'm not making any money, you never know that somebody could walk up and want to put you in a store somewhere, for sure. So how then, going on to that, one of our members, Miriam, asked the question, what do you like to see in line sheets and order forms or catalogs when ordering from an independent maker?
That's a really good question. I love great photos. I think that shows that you put enough detail into not only showcasing or making your own products, but that you really want to highlight and kind of emphasize that. And that's, it kind of sucks, but the thing is, like, if you have really blurry photos, like, my first impression would just be like, okay, well, I want to go see something a bit more engaging, right? So great photos, I think, is important. Prices, I think, are important. And you can put a range. You don't necessarily need to put a hard price, because I know that sometimes it depends on the order volume behind that. I think a good thing to do is to have a reference point when those prices are in question, right? I'm sure, if you haven't yet, just have a note by you, like, in terms of, like, buckets, and which, like, if it's under 100 units, this is the price. If it's, like, 100 to 200, this is the price. So you can give yourself a range so that the buyer also knows where they can work the budget, because they're managing their own budget as well. And sometimes if it comes up too high, it's just, like, it's hard for them to revisit that. And you want to give yourself the opportunity to have them revisit. Minimums are important also. If you need to have at least 50 in production in order to get it going, then please do let the buyer know and put that on your sheet so that that can actually set up like, okay, I'm just going to order 50, you know, like it could sway a buyer to just kind of think, okay, well, I'll just order 50 then, you know, if that's what's needed. And also color and body options. I think that the best line sheets that I've come across, and especially when ordering, is having all the information in front of me so I can make really conscious decisions, and seeing how it fits within my assortments as I'm deciding on what's going to go out for the month or what's going on for next month, and the story and color themes. Also, if you want, I know this is at your discretion, but a lot of buyers actually are, and retailers are really into kind of this exclusive mentality, which is like, you know, they want to be selling something that is particularly special just to them, and that adds to the interest in a designer when they're able to be flexible to say, like, look, this is a tote bag that I want, but I wanted a specific color that's only going to be available to me. I want to change the length of, you know, the strap a little bit so that it's a bit more snug. Like those things, I think if you're open to being flexible with your product and, you know, and your production calendar, then it's wonderful to also put that in there too.
So how would you sort of note that in a line sheet then? Would you just say contact me for exclusives or open to adjustment in product? Okay.
Yeah. I think that that's a great way to approach. Or collaborations, or open to exclusive collaborations. Like those are good things to know too.
Okay, so then how do buyers see working with these sort of small artisans and makers versus sort of bigger companies that have, you know, a different sort of production?
Right. Yeah. I think there is a genuine gravity to small artisans because there's a story, right? There are unique stories, and there are more of them versus bigger brands or bigger production home manufacturers that just have kind of one story. So it's every buyer is out to uncover a new gem, and so compelling stories are super important. And I think when it comes to retailers, there's like this crazy ethical line, right? When it comes to small artisans, retailers, and larger operations, and so just be mindful of that too. I would say make your stories defensible, make your products defensible, because I know that there are, you know, many times it's not in the favor of small artisans when larger operations are in play and they have massive production capabilities. So putting yourself out there and making yourself vulnerable is definitely really admirable, but also make it defensive. So make sure your story is defensive so that as a buyer, I'm like, okay, only this person can tell this story, and I don't want to approach anybody else with it. So that's my advice. So with that, I also think that the quality of your product should also be included in that storytelling that you share with the buyers and in your line sheets when they are, you know, with you, so that you can drill in the fact that this is really unique to my point of view, and it's hard to take this to kind of mass produce. For example, I'll give you a really interesting story. When I was at Anthropologie, we started working with Claire Vivier back when she was like, I think her team was like 3 people big. Now it's a major operation, which I'm so excited to see. But we knew her clutches were just her story, because she built this whole like French chic thing around it, and it was just so hard for us to go back and say like, okay, can we build a French chic story? It just didn't seem authentic. And for that reason, we just started building this kind of relationship with her where she would deliver exclusive products with us. And we knew that our customer was really clear on who Claire Vivier was, because she's also built a story outside of Anthropologie with that French chic story. And so my advice is just to kind of protect that as much as possible. And buyers do want to work with small artisans. Just make sure, you know, that you are telling a very compelling story on your end.
Good to know.
Yeah. And
So what? Oh, what?
oh, I just wanted to do a small note on, I know you mentioned like production and stuff, and I didn't really get
Yeah.
into that, but just be really knowledgeable about your manufacturing process, you know, and your capabilities to deliver.
Mm.
Because with bigger retailers, deliveries and inventory and like timelines and all of those things are really important in order for them to hit their budgets and their targets. And if the delivery doesn't hit on time, they end up, you know, money's lost on both parties, and then the relationship can kind of shift from there. So you want to be able to protect that as much as possible. So I would say just be clear on communications, and, you know, be clear on and know your manufacturing process. So if you know, buffer the estimate to your buyer so that they're aware. So if anything happens, just don't, you know, cut it to the line. That tends to happen when it's, I know it's like you're working with factories that, you know, with limited quantities, they're not going to throw you up to the top of production, you know, so those are challenges.
So what are the reasons that you or other buyers then sort of decide to move forward with a vendor? You kind of mentioned like this it factor and
Yeah.
having a defensible story, but maybe what are the other reasons that are
Yeah.
reasons that you say
I guess
like
the
this
more
is it?
practical reasons, the right price, you know, as a buyer. And when we do roadmaps and kind of assortment building, I typically work in like a price bucket tier. So I think about products in a good price bucket, a better price bucket, and a best price bucket. And if it's a good price bucket and I'm working within an organization like, for example, Anthropologie, um, we would have the capabilities to manufacture much cheaper at better margins for those kind of lower price point items. So I would be looking to actually fill the middle and best price point items a bit more. So making sure that those things are priced right, I think is really key to moving forward. Great communications is also really key. I think follow-up is extremely important um, on the vendor side for a buyer, because there's just so many things in their week that they just can forget about placing that PO. So if you really want to get it, just make sure that, you know, you're really good on following up and closing that PO, because sometimes it can just like slip out. And, you know, key things are, you know, build an authentic relationship with your buyers, and make sure you're flexible, and that, you know, in the end just gives you a really good repetitive relationship that they'll always come back to you for your next season, or kind of exclusive development. Those are really great things for your brand and for their brand as well.
Okay, kind of on the reverse of that, what are the typical mistakes that you kind of see, like that tend to be rookie, I guess, mistakes, or things that you're just like, ah, I would never work
Yeah.
with anyone that does.
I think a big thing is when they overpromise and underdeliver. You know, like I go
Mm,
back to the whole delivery, knowing your manufacturing process, knowing your production timeline. If, you know, if I have a late delivery, you know, and it's getting pushed back for like weeks after weeks and multiple times, like I think that just gonna, you know, I think the relationship just ends there. And sometimes if it's really serious, and I hope it doesn't happen to smaller artisans, but in typically bigger organizations, there's, you know, chargebacks for the fact that they're missing sales. So, you know, I think that those things are really important, and typically are some mistakes with smaller artisans. When they see such a big number coming from a retailer, it's just like, okay, yeah, I can do it, but it's not. It's basically understanding that you can, what your capabilities are. Product is super important. You know, if you know that, again, this is like product. You could be selling the same thing but tell a different story, and I think that the story is like product and story go hand in hand. So make sure your products aren't too similar to the booth next to yours. If I'm gonna go, you know, to a more, you know, craft fair or flea market, and, you know, I think that's super important. I talked about like people follow up. Potentially, it's like, oh, I remember that vendor. I should have given them a PO like a month ago, but I didn't because I forgot. But, you know, like there wasn't it takes two to tango. There wasn't that, like I didn't feel like you really wanted to be in there as well. Yeah, so those are things that I think are common mistakes that end up kind of, backfiring for some.
Totally. Yeah, those are all like, you're not sort of caring about your own business enough to go after the business and
Yeah,
let people remind people of that, you're there and
yeah,
that you are
yeah,
doing business. Like,
yeah.
obviously you don't want to hound someone, but
No,
also like if somebody's genuinely interested in you and you can't just be
right.
like, well, they're not saying anything.
Right. So the know your audience factor is very important as well. Like follow up and know who your audience is, and kind of do it in a very gently remind. I think that that's kind of like a term that you can use in emails. I just want to gently remind you that we're
Yeah.
closing off orders. Those are really good kind of openers for emails.
Um, so what is it that vendors need then, like a basic toolkit to be set up for wholesale success?
I think it's like these themes keep on coming up. I think on the wholesale side, if you're not doing it already, you should totally be building proper roadmaps, because buyers do and merchants do. And what I mean by that is, you have a retailer list or a stock list of like 10 different retailers, and 2 of them sell your low price point items, and and the other 8 sell your middle price point items. Just know how to build that into your assortment, because I think it's super important to not underserve certain demographics in your client list, and not overserve certain demographics to which you've kind of wasted time and energy on designing something that's not going to get picked up. So knowing those things are important, and with that product roadmap, also think about how you're pricing your items. I think that's super important for you to kind of. It's no secret out there that with buyers that are working with third-party vendors, that they expect margins of 50%, on top of their product. So just keep that in mind, and also keep that consistency across the board. If you have an online presence as well, your price points should be similar to what your clients are going to be selling your products for. So just that needs to be consistent across the board. Um, and in the roadmap, I think also think about seasonality, and like when you're going to be doing, like, if it's summertime, like think about those themes, and what buyers are particularly looking for in those time periods. It's really easy to kind of just, the beginning of every quarter, do a little walkthrough of each of all your favorite stores, at the beginning of the month, and kind of take note of what they're kind of, if they're common themes, and then you can use that the next year or the next season to kind of benchmark common themes that are going on, so you can build product properly. I think that that's really important for wholesale success.
About how far out should people be like projecting the seasons then? Like if buyers are buying now, like how far out will that product actually
I
be?
think it's kind of crazy, because nowadays there's this whole like fashion movement, right? There's there's like literally no time to breathe, because I feel like once it's on a runway, Forever 21, Zara, and H&M are really great at just like, it's out there already. And I think that's what you should stray away from at all points, is to not look at those things. I think a good projection with working with a retailer, if you're building product together or collaborating, is a good 6 months cushion. That way you can have 3 months to work out kind of like what the product is going to look like, prices and all of that, and while you're working with your factory or your makers, and then you have a 3-month time period to deliver that product, to make the product and deliver it out. So I think that 6 months is a really good cushion. Before, it used to be 9 months, 12 months, but it's just so hard to keep up the pace, and I think 6 months is a good projection. You also have a lot of buyers sometimes that are looking to fill up their budget in season, and I think that those things you can't really predict, but if you have extra stock, I would recommend that you also kind of do a follow-up in season and say, look, this is what we still have available. If you're interested, let us know. We can get some units out to you, and that's actually sometimes a lifesaver to a buyer.
That's good to know. Okay, and then one last thing is just sort of like where you kind of mentioned craft fairs, things like that, trade shows, obviously, but like, what are like the key places that you know that like buyers are like, I'm always on this site and I'm always looking here, and this is where they're going to?
Gosh, I think it depends on the field, right? I think in freeze and ladies wear. I mean, this is kind of silly, but when you say, like, I would say Pinterest is, like, now the go-to. They're building their themes around that. And so I know that there's a ton of companies out there that kind of strategize on when to pin, so it's getting repinned frequently. There's a lot of these things out there, and it's kind of, like, actually a headache to think about. But quite often they use Pinterest a lot. Refinery, that's a go-to that I go to just to get, like, a buzz. I also like looking at local sites, like, within the city, like the LAist, the New York, the DCist, like just the IST. I don't even know what their company is, or that media.
I think it's Gotham, really right? Is the major one, and then they're all under it. Gothamist?
Yeah. Yes. Gotham. You're right. I love going to that because I feel like it gives me an idea of the local scene. And as much as, buyers are super busy, they like to dig and hunt for things, and it's just part of, like, the nature of the job. So, don't feel bad if you're not making refinery. Like, do something that, puts you on the list on a local site. And I think that don't be too discouraged that you won't be discovered that way. I think the best way is to tackle kind of like local sites, because the discovery aspect is really enticing to buyers.
What if somebody lives outside of like a major metropolitan area like LA, right, New York, or San Francisco? Like, how would they sort of tackle that?
You know what? That's really interesting. I think the great thing is actually leveraging your community, right? So I think communities like this, right? Academy of Handmade, just really putting yourself out there with like-minded people. With Shopstoree and what we're doing there is just bringing communities together. So I'm the co-founder of Shopstoree right now, and as you mentioned, it's a way to visually shop, but we're curating like brick and mortar shops that you would normally not visit. I mean, like, you wouldn't go to Portland right now to just go see the shop, and now you can visually see it online. And a great thing that we've learned from our retailers and working with these kinds of brick and mortar merchants is they really establish communities and leverage each other and lean on each other. And I think that, if someone in your community has, gotten, some kind of recognition, like, it's wonderful to kind of support that and kind of learn from them as well. I think that, there's power in numbers, so you really want to be aligned, not doing this by yourself. It's kind of hard and super challenging, I think. If you are doing it on your own, the internet is an amazing tool. So how can you build a story on your own? I would give you $1 million to do that for me, because like, it's such a hard thing to do. But the people who do it well do it right, and it's great to see. I don't know. I think the internet's just making things so much easier. So I think if you build that, use those tools, go on LinkedIn.
Right. Keep putting yourself out there in as many channels as possible that make sense. And like, I think it's always suspicious when somebody is like, oh, I have this business, and there's like a page for them, or like there's nothing that comes up in Google, or I don't really trust that you're a business. You have no social media, this one weird website or whatever. Like, you kind of wonder how serious they are.
Exactly. If you can do it, that's awesome.
Okay, well, I think that is mostly it then. If Stacy, did you have any questions? I think Stacy was in the chat. Miriam left the chat. I think she's done too. Okay, well, where can people see your stuff, and how can they contact you after this if they're interested in following up or
Yeah,
what's?
I mean, I'm totally open to helping, and you know, I mean, if you need help to kind of think about or brainstorm around anything that we've talked about here in this session, you can totally reach me at Sharon, Sharon, at Shopstoree, ShopStoree.com. That was really embarrassing. I can spell right there. And you can visit shopstoree.com, and I can type it out here. If you want to see what I'm up to at the moment, yeah. And I'm always happy to help. So if that's, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. So don't be, you can add me. Go for it.
Awesome. Awesome, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.